Today, there is only one matter. The matter of my daughter. To be defied by her.
When experts stepped into King Henry VIII's hidden tomb, they believed they would find a peaceful royal burial. Instead, they discovered a damaged coffin, dark residue, and extra bones that should never have been there. The vault raised more questions than answers and stunned everyone present, whose remains were lying with Henry. Stay with us as we dive into the details of this discovery. The life and death of King Henry VIII. King Henry VIII is one of the most talked about monarchs in English history. His life mixed power, beauty, romance, fear, and deep pain. He started as a bright, handsome young prince full of charm and energy, but ended as a heavy, sick ruler trapped in a body that could no longer serve him. His story stretches across many turning points: his marriages, his political battles, his break with the Catholic Church, his desire for a strong heir, his slow fall into sickness, and finally the strange events that followed his death and burial. Henry was born in the late 15th century as the second son of Henry VII. He was not expected to be king, but everything changed when his older brother Arthur passed away as a teenager. From that moment, young Henry became the new heir. His childhood was shaped by strict lessons, sports, and training that made him skilled in music, languages, and physical strength. He grew into a tall, athletic young man admired across Europe. When he became king at a young age, he stepped onto the throne with confidence, ready to make England stronger. One of the earliest major events in his life was his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, the widow of his brother. This marriage lasted many years and began with peace and respect. Catherine was smart, kind, and loyal. She gave Henry one healthy daughter, Mary, but the couple struggled to have a surviving son. Henry believed that a male heir was necessary to protect the kingdom from civil war. After many failed pregnancies, Henry began to wonder if his marriage was cursed or invalid. This fear grew stronger as he became older and more anxious about the future of his family line. Henry's desire for a new marriage pushed him into conflict with the Catholic Church. The Pope refused to end his marriage to Catherine. In anger and determination, Henry separated England from the Pope's control. This decision created the Church of England, with Henry as its head. The break from Rome changed English religion forever. Churches were closed, monasteries were broken apart, and valuable items were taken by the crown. Henry gained huge power, but also many enemies. Still, he pressed forward because he believed he needed a son to protect the Tudor family. After Catherine, Henry married Anne Boleyn. She was young, clever, and charming. She gave birth to Elizabeth, who would later become one of England's greatest queens. But like Catherine, she could not provide a living son. As political pressures grew and enemies whispered against her, Anne was accused of serious crimes and executed. Her death shocked Europe and showed how dangerous life near the king could be. Henry's search for a wife continued, shaped by hope, anger, and fear. Henry's third wife, Jane Seymour, was gentle and calm. Many people at court said she brought peace into Henry's life after the stormy years with Anne Boleyn. Jane quickly became the most precious woman to Henry. She gave birth to the son he always wanted, Prince Edward. For a short time, Henry's worries eased. Sadly, only days after the birth, Jane grew sick with a deadly infection. She passed away soon after, leaving Henry heartbroken. Jane remained the one wife Henry truly loved and honored. He ordered that when he passed away, he should be buried beside her, keeping her memory close even in death. After Jane's death, Henry married several more times, but none of these marriages gave him the happiness he had shared with her. His fourth wife, Anne of Cleves, was a political choice. They quickly separated because Henry felt the marriage was not right. His fifth wife, Catherine Howard, was very young. She was accused of unfaithfulness and was executed. His sixth wife, Catherine Parr, cared for him during his final years and helped keep his family together. Although Henry had many marriages, none touched his heart the way Jane Seymour did. As the years passed, Henry's health began to fail. When he was young, he was strong and athletic, but a jousting accident injured his leg badly. The wound never healed properly and developed into a painful ulcer. This ulcer became infected many times and caused him severe pain for the rest of his life. The injury changed everything. Henry could no longer ride or train the way he once had. He gained weight quickly, which put pressure on his heart and made movement difficult. His growing weight, combined with a large ulcer on his leg, turned walking into a burden. Some of his clothes needed to be expanded to fit his enlarged body. He developed swelling, shortness of breath, and possibly type 2 diabetes. He also may have suffered from gout, making his joints inflamed and painful. As his body failed him, his temper grew shorter, and his decisions became more unpredictable. His advisors were careful around him, afraid of upsetting a king who lived in constant pain. Despite his illness, Henry continued to rule with determination. He oversaw major political changes, strengthened the navy, and pushed England into a new religious era. But behind the throne, his private life was filled with loneliness, frustration, and physical decline. His mood shifted often, and his relationship with his children changed many times throughout the years. Near the end, he made sure his son Edward would inherit the crown, and he restored his daughters Mary and Elizabeth to the line of succession. When Henry's illness grew worse, he knew death was close. He was in his 50s, but his body was far older in health. His leg ulcer was severe, and his heart struggled to support his heavy body. He spent much time resting, carried around the palace by servants because he could barely walk. As he weakened, he prepared his final wishes. One of the most important choices he made was his burial place. He ordered that he be placed beside Jane Seymour in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. Even in death, he wanted to remain with the wife he loved most. Henry passed away in January 1647. His body was large, swollen, and badly infected. Traditional embalming could not stop the strong internal gases that built up as the body began to break down. To protect the outer coffin, his embalmers placed him inside a heavy lead container, but even this could not fully stop the expansion of pressure. During the long funeral ceremonies, the lead coffin expanded, leaked, and in one place split open, leaving stains on the floor of Sion Abbey, where it rested before burial. When workers finally lowered Henry's coffin into the vault beneath St. George's Chapel, they placed it near Jane Seymour's coffin, just as he wanted. The vault was small and meant only as a temporary space while a grand monument was prepared. Henry had planned a huge tomb decorated with statues, black stone, golden figures, and impressive ornaments. But the monument was never finished. His children used money for other matters, and the pieces of his planned tomb were sold or reused. Henry remained in the simple vault, not the great resting place he once imagined. The bones no one expected. The mystery inside Henry VIII's vault did not begin with his huge coffin or the heavy stone covering it. It began with something far more confusing: the bones that should not have been there at all. When repair workers entered the vault in the early 19th century, they expected to see only two sets of royal remains. One was Henry VIII, the powerful king known for his marriages and break from Rome. The second was Jane Seymour, the wife he loved most, and the only one who gave him a surviving son. These two were meant to rest together in St. George's Chapel, sealed away in peace. But the moment the chamber was opened, the workmen noticed something that felt wrong. Inside the dark, tight space were more bones than expected. These were not arranged in full bodies. They were scattered in odd places, mixed with dust and lying in corners where no careful burial plan would ever place them. The workers could not match these pieces to any royal person. The strange bones did not follow the size, age, or known burial positions of Henry and Jane. They simply did not belong. In the year 1813, early written notes described what looked like a fourth presence in the vault. The record did not give a name or identity. It only stated that extra bones were found and that they could not be explained by any official burial order from the Tudor age. This puzzled everyone because the vault was not a public grave. It was a sacred space created only for monarchs. No outsider, servant, or forgotten relative was ever meant to lie inside that chamber. Experts who later looked at the reports were surprised by how unusual the discovery was. Royal burials in England were usually very controlled. Each coffin was documented. Each body had a clear position. Each vault had strict rules about who could be placed inside. So the idea that someone unknown found their way into Henry's private resting place raised serious questions. How did these bones get there? Were they placed by mistake? Were they moved during repairs? Or did something happen long before that no one recorded? The mystery grew deeper when the bones were described as fragments, not full skeletons. This meant they had been disturbed, broken, or crushed by some force over time. They were not carefully prepared or wrapped. Some pieces looked like they had shifted from their original spot. Others looked as if they had fallen from somewhere higher. The vault, designed to keep everything stable, should not have allowed such disorder. This suggested that something violent, unexpected, or structural had happened inside. One early theory was that the vault had been damaged by pressure from Henry's coffin. His body, large and swollen from illness, required a heavy lead shell. When a corpse releases gases after death, pressure builds. If the coffin has a weak point, it can break or burst. Reports from Henry's funeral process said exactly that. His coffin had already split open once before burial. If that happened again underground, parts of the coffin could have forced bones out of place, but this did not fully explain why unknown bones were present. Another idea was that the vault had been opened or disturbed during renovations at the chapel. Over the centuries, St. George's Chapel saw many repairs. Each time workers went underground, there was a chance that coffins shifted, lids cracked, or loose bones fell out. Still, this did not explain why the bones did not match the expected bodies. Even if Henry's coffin leaked or broke apart, it would only affect his own remains, not introduce new ones. Some historians suggested that the extra bones might have come from nearby burials. Chapel floors were often reused, and older graves sometimes collapsed. Over time, bones from a previous resting place could slip into new openings. But again, this theory did not fit perfectly. Henry's vault was sealed with heavy stone and built differently from the simple graves around it. The chance of stray bones entering such a secure chamber was small. The most unsettling possibility was that someone, at some unknown time, had placed another person in the vault without record. Royal history had moments of secrecy, especially during the Tudor period. If someone needed a hidden burial, placing them with a king would erase suspicion. But no document, letter, or report mentioned such an act. If it happened, it left no written trace. But the story does not end with the collapsing coffin. Something else inside the vault showed a disturbing clue about what time and decay can do to royal remains. And this clue raised new questions about the condition of the king's body. If the vault was already broken and crowded, then what terrifying sight greeted the investigators when they entered in the year 1813? The Lantern Descent. What 1813 investigators saw. When workers accidentally opened the vault in the year 1813, they immediately understood that they had uncovered something unusual. A simple repair to the floor of St. George's Chapel had broken through the stone and revealed a hidden void beneath. Once word reached the Prince Regent, who later became King George IV, he insisted on seeing exactly what lay below. The breach had exposed a royal burial, and he wanted a clear inspection. Men carrying lanterns climbed down into the tight, cold space. The air was stale, untouched for more than 160 years. The light from the lanterns revealed a chamber filled with strange shadows, broken metal, and scattered remains. The investigators could not understand the scene at first because the vault did not look like any proper royal burial they expected. The first thing they noticed was the condition of Henry VIII's coffin. The lead, once thick and strong, was crushed inward. It had burst open in several places. The wooden inner shell had completely rotted away, leaving only twisted metal sheets and scattered bone. The remains of the king were partly exposed. His skeleton lay mixed with thick, dark, tar-like material created by centuries of decay. The pressure from his decomposing body, combined with the impact from Charles's coffin, had reshaped everything. The investigators saw large bones that no longer rested in normal positions. Some pieces were pushed into corners, others lay beneath broken fragments of the coffin. Everything suggested that the coffin had been destroyed slowly over time, starting from the first burst during the funeral journey and worsening when Charles's coffin was forced into the tiny vault. Charles I's coffin looked very different. It was damaged but still solid enough to open. The investigators lifted parts of the lid to confirm the identity inside. They found his head separated from his body, placed carefully on his chest. The features of his face remained surprisingly clear due to the cold and the way his coffin had been sealed. The sight of a preserved royal face in such a grim setting added even more shock to the inspection. One of the observers, a physician named Sir Henry Halford, examined the skeleton and removed a small piece of bone from the neck. He later returned it, but the act made clear how strange and disturbing the entire situation felt to everyone present. They had entered expecting order and found something closer to a scene of destruction. But even with the crushed coffin, exposed bones, and dark residue, nothing puzzled the investigators more than the extra skeletal fragments lying in the chamber. These pieces did not match the shape, size, or age of the two known monarchs, or of Jane Seymour. There were pieces that seemed too small, others that were too light, and some that had no obvious place in the burial history of the vault. The investigators tried to match the bones to known bodies, but they could not. The records did not mention additional burials. The chapel's documents gave clear instructions about who should be in the vault. Yet the bones lay there, mixed among the remains of two kings, with no explanation. This discovery raised questions that could not be answered by the evidence available at the time. No one could confirm whether the fragments came from a nearby grave that had shifted, from an earlier burial that was never recorded, or from a disturbance long before Henry was placed in the vault. The lantern light showed clearly that something unexpected had happened in the chamber over centuries. The vault was not simply crowded, it was altered by collapse, decay, and hidden changes that left behind a puzzle without a complete answer. The investigators left the vault knowing that they had seen something very rare, the remains of famous kings, and a mystery that history never explained. Their report described the scene, but it did not solve the deeper questions raised by the scattered bones and the broken coffins. If the lantern light revealed only part of the truth, then what deeper mysteries waited in the untouched layers of the vault? Theories of the unknown dead. The discovery of extra bones inside Henry VIII's vault has challenged historians for more than 200 years. The vault was meant to hold only the king and Jane Seymour. Later, Charles I was placed there in secret. Yet the remains found in the chamber in the year 1813 showed that at least one more person had been there long before the investigators arrived. This unexpected presence has led to several theories, each trying to explain how unknown bones ended up in a place that was supposed to be protected. One theory points to Queen Anne, the wife of Queen Anne's consort, George of Denmark. She suffered many tragic pregnancies, including several stillborn babies. Some historians believe that one or more of these infants may have been placed temporarily in simple wooden coffins and set inside the vault while arrangements were made for a more permanent burial. Wooden coffins decay over time, especially in damp underground spaces. If the small coffins broke down completely, the bones of the infants might have become mixed with other remains in the vault. This idea seems possible because the size of some bones found did not match adult remains. However, there is no confirmed record placing these infants inside Henry's vault, so the theory remains uncertain. Another explanation says the vault may have been cut through an older burial when it was first built. St. George's Chapel was expanded over many centuries, and some earlier graves were relocated or disturbed during construction work. If the workers who built Henry's chamber encountered an older burial, they may have moved the bones to a corner or set them aside without documenting the action. The priority at the time would have been completing the vault quickly, especially for a king. Burial practices were different, and records were not always detailed. A monk or a medieval church worker could have been resting in that ground long before Henry's vault was added. If their remains were shifted aside, they may have remained unnoticed until the investigators opened the chamber in the 19th century. A third theory looks at the political tension during the Tudor period. Henry VIII's reign was full of conflict, executions, religious struggles, and shifting loyalties. Some historians suggest that the unknown bones may belong to a person caught in these power struggles. This idea says the vault might have been used to hide someone who passed away during political chaos and who needed to be buried away from public eyes. The tomb of a powerful king would have been the last place anyone expected to find a secret burial. If someone wanted to hide a body completely, placing it inside Henry's vault would have been an effective method. No enemies would search there, and no official would question the sealed chamber. There is also the idea that the bones could have been moved accidentally during later repairs or rearrangements inside the chapel. Over many years, different workers modified floors, walls, and sections of the church. Bones from older graves sometimes shift when ground levels change or when stones settle. Without proper labeling, Remains could easily be displaced and end up in unexpected places. The vault could have been affected by this slow movement without anyone noticing. The most complicated part of the mystery comes from how the bones were found. They were not neatly arranged. They were scattered across the vault, mixed among the broken fragments of Henry's coffin. This made it difficult for investigators to connect the bones with a clear historical event. The fragments did not seem to belong to one single person. Some were smaller, some larger, and others did not match the age or condition of Henry, Jane, or Charles. The irregular placement made the mystery even deeper. Modern historians have tried to study the reports from 1813, but the notes from that time were brief and lacked scientific detail. There were no tools for modern analysis, no DNA testing, and no proper mapping of where each bone was found. The bones remain inside the vault today, sealed along with the rest of the remains, which means experts cannot examine them again without disturbing the site. This makes the mystery almost impossible to solve with certainty. Although each theory has some evidence, none can fully explain the scattered bones. If Henry's vault hid mysteries this large, why was he placed in such a plain and unfinished space in the first place? The tomb that was never built. Henry VIII never imagined that he would rest in a simple underground chamber. His burial plans were enormous. He wanted a monument designed to show his power, his success, and his lasting influence as a king. The tomb he planned was meant to be one of the greatest structures in England, large enough to impress anyone who saw it. It was designed with rich materials, many decorations, and a size that would make it stand out across history. The grand design came from a monument originally created for Cardinal Wolsey. After Wolsey fell from power, Henry took control of the unfinished structure and planned to expand it to a scale that matched his royal image. The monument was supposed to include more than 140 statues, each carved with great detail. Large bronze figures were meant to stand around the tomb. Huge candelabras were planned to shine light across the monument. Rare black touchstone was included in the design to give the structure a deep, rich color. A life-sized figure of Henry beside Jane Seymour was also planned for the top of the tomb. This impressive project would have required great skill, time, and money. Henry approved the design and intended for the tomb to be completed while he lived, but many parts of the monument remained unfinished during his lifetime. Costs became high, and craftsmen needed more time, but the work never reached a final stage. When Henry passed away, the monument stood incomplete, and the responsibility to finish it fell to his children. Edward VI, Mary I, and Elizabeth I had different priorities. They each faced political and financial problems. The country was changing, religious conflicts were strong, and building a huge tomb for Henry did not fit their needs at the time. Some historians think that Henry's children may have felt resentment toward him for the difficult times he created. Others think they simply lacked the money and stability required to finish such a massive project. The monument pieces were stored and left unused as years passed. As time moved forward, the unfinished monument lost its purpose. Pieces of it were removed and sold. Some were turned into metal for other uses. Others were placed in different parts of the chapel or sent to storage. The large black sarcophagus planned for Henry was later used to bury Admiral Nelson after the Battle of Trafalgar. Bit by bit, the tomb meant for the king disappeared, leaving nothing that resembled the giant monument he had imagined. Because the grand monument was never built, Henry had to be placed in a simple vault beneath the chapel. This vault was meant to be temporary until his real tomb was completed, but the project was never revived, and the temporary vault became permanent without any official decision. The small chamber was not designed for long-term royal rest. It lacked the space, strength, and dignity expected for a king known for his power and influence. The failure to finish the tomb meant Henry rested in a chamber that did not match his expectations or his plans. It also meant that when later events forced Charles I's burial into the same vault, the space became overcrowded and unstable. The unfinished monument indirectly led to the chaos discovered centuries later. His grand vision vanished, replaced by a chamber that could barely hold the weight of 2 coffins. If a missing monument shaped the chaos inside the vault, how did Henry's own decaying body turn his coffin into a disaster that shocked experts centuries later? The 21st century forensics Henry never expected. For many years, Henry VIII's vault stayed closed, dark, and untouched. People believed the mystery inside was finished, and nothing new could be learned without breaking the chamber again. But modern technology has allowed experts to study sealed spaces in ways that were impossible in the 19th century. These new tools have opened a fresh path, giving scientists the chance to examine the famous vault without disturbing a single bone. The 21st century has turned the old Tudor mystery into a scientific case, with new clues rising slowly from the cold stone floor. Researchers began with thermal imaging, a method that captures heat patterns. Even materials that seem silent can give off tiny changes in temperature. When the scanners passed over Henry's vault, experts noticed unusual warm shapes within the metal layers of the coffin. The signal suggested there might be more organic residue inside than the old investigators had reported. This matched the idea that Henry's body had continued to break down violently after burial. A large buildup of gas and soft tissue remains could explain why the lead coffin had burst and sunk downward centuries ago. In simple terms, the heat scan supported earlier descriptions of a body that did not rest quietly. The next step involved microvibration mapping. This delicate tool sends tiny pulses through stone and metal, measuring how the surfaces tremble in response. Every object has a unique vibration pattern, and differences in density can reveal hidden shapes. When the vault was scanned, some sections responded in unexpected ways. Experts believed these shifts might show areas where the original structure collapsed and where additional materials, such as loose bones, were now resting. These readings created a clearer picture of how the chamber changed after Charles I's coffin was lowered on top of Henry's weakened one. The distortion lined up with early accounts of crushed supports and broken lids, showing that the vault had suffered far more damage than anyone knew. Gas analysis tools added another puzzle piece. Scientists collected air samples from tiny openings around the chamber. These samples contained traces of old organic gases, likely trapped for centuries. A few of the molecules hinted at materials that did not match Henry alone. They suggested the presence of more than one type of human residue, which raised attention toward the extra bones seen in the 19th century. These gases cannot identify a person, but they can point to the number of bodies involved. Combined with other scans, the data supported the theory that at least 2 additional individuals may be inside the vault. The hope is not to disturb the tomb, but to build a small library of samples from the environment around it. Modern science cannot yet give a final answer, but it is closer than any earlier generation. Each new test shines a tiny light into a space that has been silent for hundreds of years. Henry VIII may have been one of England's strongest rulers, yet his tomb continues to raise questions he never expected to face. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.